On the show today, we want to know if you think the deputies who arrested Breonna Greer in Georgia should be charged after she fell out of their moving patrol car and died from head injuries. Investigators found that the deputies didn't close the rear passenger door of the car after she'd been arrested and handcuffed. She also was not seatbelted in the car. Still with me, of course, criminal defense attorneys Jack Rice and Josh Schiffer. Let's go to our first comment, gentlemen, from a viewer on Twitter. Absolutely. They apparently didn't fasten her in a seatbelt. Same scenario with Freddie Gray. And we were just talking about Freddie Gray as one who was had a knife legally arrested, put in the back of a van. And he had such traumatic injuries on life support, later had to be removed. So let me ask Jack your thoughts first.
Officers have obligations. They have to treat people a certain way. And when you fail to do that, there's going to be a price that needs to be paid. In this particular case, this officer failed. He should have at least closed and locked that door. Isn't there a requirement to do that? You had somebody under arrest. Contemplate that for a second.
And what about seat belting them in, Josh? And what are your thoughts?
There's actually a lot of standard operating procedures that officers have to follow. They're trained to report this. And in fact, many police reports will say, I secured the individual in the back of the car. They were seat belted. I checked the cuffs, locked them. Boom. Boom. How that didn't happen, that's a big question in this, and it's a good question why that didn't happen.
It's a good question. You mentioned earlier, what is in that first police report? Wouldn't we like to see that? Our next comment comes from Charlie, who says in part, if she was handcuffed or even if she was not, when placed in the car, the officers became responsible, just as in the Floyd case. Now, you know I was laughing because I've got family members that are text messaging me as opposed to going on Twitter, but that's basically what they said. What do you think?
The real question's going to be not, is the officer going to be found to be responsible? I think that just like that viewer said, the officer is clearly responsible. Whether it is something that is actionable, big question. I'm going to say I doubt it, and I'm going to say the state fights them on it.
Oh, what do you think?
Yeah, it's typical. Well, how many times have we seen the officers' reports simply don't reflect reality? And we've seen this happen. It certainly happened in the Chauvin case, right, with George Floyd, where all of a sudden you have other videotapes that show up that say that's simply inconsistent with what the police report said. In that particular case, they called that in and said he was fighting us from the beginning. We tried to put him in the car. We put him down, and he continued to fight. He didn't continue to fight, and then he died.
Right. Right. All right. Our next comment comes from Marcy. Sadly, mistakes happen, period. Done. This isn't criminal. It was a mistake. I have to ask you, and I appreciate there's some other viewers, both sides of the fence here, but if it were me, and if I said, Josh, I'm going to give you a ride home, climb in the back seat, close my door, the door's not closed, and the seatbelt's not on, and you fall asleep because you've been in court for 5 days, what happens when you fall out? Am I criminally charged?
There's a negligence issue, but this intersection of being in custody changes everything. When you're in custody, you are subject to no freedom. You are fully controlled by someone else. Therefore, that other person's responsible for your care.
All right. Do you think criminal charges are going to be coming?
Likely not, but I appreciate the person's response saying, look, mistakes happen. And they do. Right. But the question is, at what level? At what point do you say mistakes happen versus you're actually culpable? You're responsible for the failures to act in a certain manner. And I think that's the real question here.
And that's a higher standard that officers, as well as a lot of different people in those types of positions, are held to. Our next comment comes from Leanne, asked, if a parent failed to secure their child in a car seat, failed to close the door, would they be charged for negligence even though they meant no harm? Are parents not charged every day for accidents? They absolutely are. Jack, okay, quick,
child endangerment. Child endangerment. That's what happens when you don't put your kid in a seat and you don't lock them in. It's a criminal charge, and so in a case like this, especially with somebody who's mentally ill, you may have that very same problem.
Right. 30 seconds.
But there may be more protections due to the fact that it's a law enforcement setting. There's certainly going to be civil liability limitations and immunities. Whether there are criminal charges, that's going to be a brave district attorney to go arrest a police officer. But it does happen. We have good public servants out there.
All right.